This is the Analysis in Chains with Nathan Williams and Neil Kieran.
Hello everyone and welcome to Analysis in Chains. Nathan Williams here. I'm actually on the road. It is conference season and I am currently in California at a meeting of the Responsible Minerals Initiative, and so as a result, going around and meeting piles and piles of people who are interested in the very topics that I am. Now, at the same time, the Malta Blockchain Summit is going on. And I wasn't able to attend. However, my good friend David Doepel was. Now, he's been on the show a couple of times, and today he had the opportunity to interview David Orban about Malta's blockchain regulations and legislation and their strategy. And so I want to thank David for taking the time to conduct the interview as our on-site correspondent. And without further ado, here is David Doepel and David Orban. Keep on hashing.
Okay. I'm David Doepel, the CEO of Demand Film, and I'm here in Malta with
David Orban, founder and managing partner of Network Society.
And by way of full disclosure, one of the reasons I'm here is because of the advice of David and his company, because we launched our Maltese subsidiary company back in April with the idea that at a certain point this year, the Maltese government would pass legislation and then pass regulations. And we're here today on the 1st of November because, in fact, the regulations have gone into effect. David, what's your sense about what that means and what's happening as you're seeing it today on the ground at this incredible conference that's happening here?
I have been in blockchain since 2011, Bitcoin. Then blockchain was still the underlying technology, but what we were talking about then was Bitcoin. And this community has deep rules in anarchy and revolutionary ambitions, and a lot of the people who have been in that world for these years feel that the regulators are unwelcome. But there are many others, the majority of the participants, probably the totality of the participants in this conference, that feel that the regulators and the regulations are actually necessary. So there is a fascinating interplay between the two camps and how each is pushing its own objectives of accelerated innovation and of cautious innovation.
I had the privilege of hearing the Prime Minister address a standing room audience only this morning. In fact, not just standing room, but no room, because there are people lined up outside as well trying to be in there. And what struck me about his comments was the idea that the country has made a very clear decision to embrace the innovation, and then, in addition to that, to do it right. And as he described it, to be cautious about it, but to proceed very methodically. And as he went through some of the different elements of the legislation, and then what the implications of that would mean for companies being welcome here, I was really impressed. And certainly the reaction of the audience to that was incredibly positive as well.
Regulators have an unenviable position, a situation where they cannot do right, they can only do wrong, because per definition they are asked to do something that is almost impossible. They have to predict all the implications of something that is so new that even those who are deepest in analyzing it don't know what all the implications are. So regulators have really hard time, but in Malta, the probability that they know what they are doing is vastly increased by the fact that it is not the first time that they are doing it.
Yeah, and you're referring to the iGaming industry that has found its home here as well.
15 years ago, the internet was already, 10 years old, or the commercial internet. And it was evident to everybody since the very, very beginning that it could be applied to gambling, gaming. But no jurisdiction until then was able to, or was courageous enough to say, we think we can regulate it. Malta stepped up to that challenge, successfully so, and became kind of the world capital of online gaming. And they are applying that kind of experience to the digital ledger technology regulations as well.
Yeah, so things like anti-money laundering, the KYC rules, security auditing. It seems like that the government has thought through each of those sort of buckets, if you will, and have created some regulations and then a structure for companies to become authorised to then be official auditors and agents. And it seems that the structure's been devolved not from the government itself to do the policing, but to have a group of competent professionals who you then engage with, who then are in turn licensed to represent and authorise what you're doing.
You need an ecosystem of professional practitioners who are able to carry out every step and who help the projects that want to launch in Malta. And that kind of ecosystem is available here and is very eager to take advantage of the additional business and to help along the projects to succeed. Also, the government has been smart in making sure that it is not the central bureaucracy that is tasked with executing all those steps, but they are kind of outsourcing it and achieving scale through that. In other jurisdictions like Switzerland, for example, this is not the case, and it is a huge bottleneck where projects are waiting 6 months or 9 months to be licensed and to be authorized to launch.
Yeah. And I think by creating a marketplace around which then these different companies are, I guess, vying for your services, hopefully over time that'll make it competitive pricing-wise too. But I have a feeling that numbers haven't been set yet, but I do have a feeling it's going to be expensive to do this here. And I wonder for companies like myself and many others that are contemplating putting their ICOs through a more formal jurisdiction like this, what are the benefits of that?
Well, 2017 has been characterized by an incredible level of enthusiasm around ICOs. And it has been the case that many investors were chasing a very rapid, unjustified appreciation of certain tokens whose fundamentals were just not there, not only from a financial point of view, but definitely the projects that were promising to build certain infrastructure or applications or communities were not doing that. And the question then is, were they not doing that because they just didn't have enough time, or they were not good enough, or were they not doing that because they never even intended to do that? They just wanted to get the money and run, right? So the regulators' instinctive response to that is, yeah, we need to make it hard. Because if you don't comply, you are in civil or maybe even criminal violation of some law. If you comply and it is hard, well, yes, that is the price you've got to pay to play. And you know, whether it is too hard or not is somewhat subjective. I am definitely for democratizing the tools of entrepreneurship, including capital formation, including experimenting with new ways of forming capital, i.e. ICOs, utility tokens, and for me the bar should be the lowest possible. Still, of course, finding ways to eliminate scammers from the game, but not making it again exclusive to those who have access to capital, but to make sure that we run the largest number of experiments possible in order to find the sustainable solutions to the challenges that we have.
Yeah, and I think that there's some really great insights in what you've said, and I guess some messages and maybe not a warning, but an opportunity for the government to make sure that as it sets these bars going forward, that it's a high bar for those who are saying, I want you to invest in what I'm doing, but a low bar for people to have the choice to invest, and that it moves away from sophisticated investors and creates a marketplace in which anybody can actually participate. And I think, I haven't read it yet, but I was told by one of the law firms who were reading this at midnight last night that it looks like there was a place in the regulations that was allowing first-time investors to participate as well.
Yes, and there are some points there that protect inexperienced investors at the retail level from excessive enthusiasm. Projects should not accept, according to the latest revision of the regulations, money from inexperienced investors for more than 5,000 euro over the course of 2 years, or more than 1% of their wealth. And okay, that is a given level of guidelines that democratizes investing. What actually I was referring to is democratizing capital formation, meaning that a startup, a project, a team should be able and say, we need $100,000. We don't have a rich uncle, but we are good putting together a website to communicate our idea, and they should be able to get that money, and maybe then $1 million and maybe $2 million. It shouldn't be easy to get $100 million. That was the case, I mean, relatively speaking, in 2017, right? You were able just to market the hell out of it, and nothing else was needed, right?
Yeah. Whereas in 2018, getting $100 was hard work.
And the traditional venture capital market actually was fairly well structured, is still in going in phases. You know, you had the friends and family round for a few tens of thousands of dollars. You have the angel round for a few hundreds of thousands of dollars. You have the seed round for 500,000 or $1 million. You have the A round for a few $1 million, B round for tens of millions of dollars, and so on. And at each phase, there are certain checks and balances, both in terms of what the startup receives and in terms of what are the protections towards the investors. So it could be the case that the blockchain-based tokenized business models should also embrace this phased approach, where projects raise what they need. Why should you sit on $100 million if you don't even know what to do with it for the next 3-4 years?
So we're at November 1, which we're told today will be an auspicious day in the history of blockchain when it's being written later, I guess. What's your sense about moving forward into 2019, and particularly sort of what Malta is doing and how that will have an effect or not, and what happens then?
So the incumbent financial industry in the US, aided and abetted by the SEC, has been able to reassert itself in the blockchain world by putting everything in a box on which they scribbled security. And it didn't matter. That is the name that they wanted everything to be called by. And now in the US, nobody's talking about anything but security token offerings. Malta is betting on the fact that there is space for innovation so that things can be seen as securities, but there can be other things as well. And one of these things can be a regulated utility token that can be designed and sold and then put on exchanges for secondary markets and then resold further, in that projects and service professionals can gather around, and that this approach will have a staying power. So 2019 will be characterized by the clash of these 2 points of view. On one hand, STOs and nothing but STOs, and on the other hand, regulated utility tokens and regulated utility token exchanges. And the two are not totally compatible. So it will be very interesting to see how it is going to play out.
Yeah, and certainly our own experience of reading the legislation and then anticipating the regulations that sort of then define what the legislation is saying. I think there is a genuine innovation in there which says there's a pure utility token which just lives within its own ecosystem and is used for goods and services. There is a security token which has an inherent value and has rights that go with it. And then there is this thing in between which in fact describes much of what can be generated by distributed ledger technologies, which is it has utility and it potentially has value because people ascribe it value and then will want to trade it as such. And that, I think they have done an innovative thing by describing that and then defining it.
And you know, it takes courage to go out on a limb and say we want to embrace this innovation, and even though our responsibility is to be relatively conservative, we don't want to hamper innovation. We want to encourage innovation. And you know, that is why, together with Malta, other smaller jurisdictions, Gibraltar and Cayman and Singapore and so on, have been out there because they have no alternative. You know, they cannot sit on their laurels and say, okay, we have trillions of dollars in the stock market, and we have investments banks and brokerages and everything else in the financial infrastructure that we have to protect. They want to attract the attention of the world through innovation.
That's great. Well, David, we managed to find a quiet corner in one of the floors, but people are sort of turning up now at the elevator, and it's probably time for us to head down to the melee downstairs, which is the 7,500 people doing deals in Blockchain Island. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.